Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here today. Thank you so much for being here today. We have a big program and we are excited to get underway. Good morning. My name is Kelly Caulfield, and I am the Executive Director of the Common Sense Institute here in Colorado. And for those of you who might not know, Common Sense is spreading across the country. Common Sense Colorado is 15 years old, but there are 3 others of us in our family. There is a Common Sense Arizona, a Common Sense Oregon, and a Common Sense Iowa. So the 4 of us are together. And for those who have not joined us before, really welcome. We're so happy you're here. This is called Eggs in the Economy. It's our quarterly gathering where we bring together voices from across Colorado, state and local policymakers, our fellows, and engaged citizens like you to dig into the issues that are shaping our state's future. Common Sense Institute, CSI, we are nonprofit, we are nonpartisan. We are dedicated to the protection and the promotion of the Colorado economy. And before we get to our program, I wanted to extend a heartfelt thank you to Vince and the Gazette for being our media sponsor today. We love doing this work with Vince and the Gazette. I am curious, please raise your hand. Is this your first time joining us at CSI Eggs in the Economy? Wow, I love seeing that. Welcome. And I don't think I'd ever seen so many cowboy hats. This makes me very happy. I like the look. Here at Common Sense, we don't tell Coloradans what to think. We give them the tools to think clearly about what's at stake. We turn 15 years old this year, and we are going to continue to do what we do best. We take the big proposals, the ones moving through the legislature, city council, or on your ballot, anything that impacts the Colorado economy, and we study it. We don't take positions, but we model the economic impact to businesses and to the state economy. And so far this year, I'm really proud of this. We've issued 65 reports. We've been busy. We have a goal to do 90, and we're going to do it. Thank you. Before we get to the program, I'm really excited because I've seen many of them today. I'd like to introduce Common Sense's Board of Directors. We have a slide with all of them, but could you please stand if you're on Common Sense Colorado's board or our national board, or raise your hand if you're already standing. I'd also like to welcome any public officials that are in the room. Could you please stand? Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to introduce the Common Sense research team. You're probably standing. Could you just raise your hand and be acknowledged? All in the back. Thank you for all of your hard work. In addition to our full-time research staff, our work doing those 90 reports a year would not be possible without our bipartisan policy fellows. And you can see them on this slide. We were just elated to have Mike King and Greg Walcher join us this year as our outdoor recreation fellows. And you'll be hearing from Greg shortly on this panel. But I also wanted to highlight a new fellow to our growing family, Greg D'Argon. 2 Greg fellows, will be our new healthcare fellow. So he just joined Common Sense. He spent 37 years in hospital management and a variety of executive chief financial officer roles, most recently 20 years working as a chief financial officer for HCA Continental Division. So with these historic changes coming to Medicaid, I think Common Sense will be very well positioned to study the economic implications for our state. Because a lot of you all are new to Common Sense Institute and our work, I know today is mainly about agriculture, but I did want to provide a quick update on the special session that was just convened by the Colorado legislature. And I want to explain how some of our research can make a difference to the debate. While the primary objective of the special session was to identify savings in the Colorado budget to bring it in line with the Big Beautiful Bill, technology was also a part of the conversation. Common Sense Institute's economist conducted the first of its kind study to quantify what would be the economic impacts and cost associated with these new artificial intelligence AI regulations in Colorado. As some of you may know, last year, Colorado became one of the first states in the nation to pass a sweeping AI law, a major move at a time when federal efforts had stalled. The state legislation passed this last year, and it was going to go into effect in February of next year. And there were concerns about what would be the cost to the economy, what would be the cost to business. No one could really answer that. We were proud to share this data during the special session. We shared this in front of the Senate and House business committees, and we found that we rank third in the US for the tech sector concentration. Every job in tech supports nearly 3 more jobs in other industries in the Colorado economy. Colorado ranks 14th in AI job postings, and AI jobs are expected to drive about 14% of Colorado's job growth in 2024. And Lord knows we need jobs. So that's important. And the economic consequences could be significant by 2030. Our economists were able to measure what would be the impact to the tech sector if the law, as drafted, would go into effect. And we found it could lead to almost 30,000 job losses and $5.5 billion in lost GDP. The legislature did decide to delay implementation of this law by 6 months, and I think that was a good thing, so it can be studied even further, but wanted to share that quick example of impact. But now back to the program today. I'm incredibly proud of having an entire Eggs in the Economy dedicated to agriculture and natural resources, and I am staring at many of the people who have asked us to do this. It's important to the Colorado economy. We couldn't have done it without these great fellows. CSI did conduct a great economic analysis of the National Western Stock Show back in 2024. We also analyzed a few ballot measures last year and the year before related to banning fur, banning slaughterhouses, Initiative 91, which related to mountain lions. We quantified the economic impacts to all of those, not to tell voters what to think or how to vote, but just so that they would have the economics of the issues as a part of their ballot guides. As many of you in this room know, Colorado's agricultural industry has long been a cornerstone of the state's economy. From the fertile plains to the high altitude valleys of the Rockies, Colorado's diverse geography supports a wide range of the sector, including including crop production and cattle rearing. Colorado is home to over 36,000 farming operations. Colorado's 66 million acres of land, almost half are designated as farmland, according to the 22 census. In 24, Colorado was a top 10 producer of 14 different crop varieties, and Colorado is one of the nation's leading lamb and sheep processors. We tried to help educate Coloradans around those data and facts, especially on our ballot guide last year. Agriculture stimulates the state's economy through both direct effects, like employment and production, and indirect impacts, such as taxes paid and value added. Colorado's ag industry drives significant economic output, and Common Sense is here to study it and help amplify those findings to the general public. I wanted to move to the 2 topics that I think many of you joined us today for. We are so proud this week we will be issuing our wolf study and Mike King and Greg Walcher's stream access study, our outdoor recreation study. And before I go through these data-driven slides, I'm a proud mom of 2 little boys. They're 5 and 8, and I just have to mention a quick funny story about wolves. He just turned 5, so he was 4 at the time, and he said to me, he knew that I was working on a wolf issue at work. And he said, "Well, Mommy, what's going on with wolves? And why are you studying this?" So I talked to him high level, and he's like, "It sounds like it's a very expensive program for the state." I was like, "Excuse me?" I'm like, how do you know that? You're 4. And he's like, "I watch the news." So the media is getting out there. He also suggested that farmers have more security cameras and that they should probably put the wolves farther away from ranches and people. So a 4-year-old said all of this. So if a 4-year-old can get it, hopefully more people can understand it through the data that we will be sharing. Pretty amazing. You can tell I'm a proud mom. So the data that you will find in our report that we'll be issuing this week on wolves, later today, tomorrow morning, the reintroduction of gray wolves in Colorado was initiated under ballot measure 114. It's brought approximately 25 wolves into the state over the past 2 years. And there are plans to introduce an additional 10 to 15 wolves between late November and February of 26. This map that you see on the slide was pretty interesting, especially for someone like me who lives in Denver and wasn't as involved in policy when the measure passed. Only 13 of Colorado's 64 counties approved the gray wolf reintroduction measure, and support was concentrated in urban Front Range counties, such as Boulder, Denver, and Arapahoe. But these wolves are really moving. Our data is showing, and we have seen in other reports, that wolves now roam an estimated 29 counties, including both rural regions and more densely populations, such as Boulder and Jefferson County, and nearly reaching Denver Metro. While CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, was designed to restore ecological balance, the widespread range of introduced wolf population has created unintended consequences, our report shows, for livestock producers. Recent compensation claims estimate that CPW undervalues the true economic losses to ranchers by an average of 43%. And for these reasons, our economists are really interested in modeling out the larger impacts to the state. The reintroduction program was initially projected to cost about $800,000 per year, and instead it has consumed $8 million in taxpayer funds. This includes about $3.5 million in expenses for conflict management, and depredation reimbursements have truly surged. In 2024 alone, claims for wolf-related livestock losses exceeded $600,000, though the actual payments were quite lower. And relative to FY 23-24, actual costs have increased by nearly 119%. These are really important statistics to the average person who may not be an expert, like many of you, on this issue. To assess the short and long-term economic impacts of gray wolf reintroduction in Colorado, our economists employed dynamic economic modeling. We hold the statewide license for REMI. That's how we test proposed policy, past policy, to understand the economic implications, indirect and direct cost. Some of the inputs that we had to identify first, though, we looked at CPW data, which concluded there are roughly 2 documented cases per wolf per year, and in each depredation case. And it's costing producers approximately $32,000 per case in losses. We found that there are negative economic consequences, and it affects more industries and demographics even outside of ranching. I think that was very interesting to me. According to the model, gray wolf reintroduction is associated with a net reduction in state GDP, decreased job losses concentrated in rural and tourism-dependent counties, and a measurable contraction in agricultural value-added output. Specifically, Common Sense's data found that between 2026 and 2040, the Coloradan reintroduction program is expected to cost the state over $334 million in lost GDP, $600 million in lost output from businesses, and more than $300 million in foregone personal income. These are pretty significant findings, and the report has this all in further detail. Our report also highlights the negative impacts on Colorado's large gaming industry, in particular the outfitting industry, which relies heavily on robust elk populations and out-of-state hunting licenses. They are also experiencing a decline in both revenue and employment, which leads to downstream effects in lodging and retail and guiding services and other similar activities. It is too early to definitively say what the decline will be to the gaming industry. But when we look at patterns from other states, and we included this in our report, we found that it can spur a 50% reduction in big game populations with clear economic consequences for those tangential industries. Just briefly, I wanted to quickly talk about the second report. It's a busy week for us on outdoor recreation. Mike King and Greg Walcher, phenomenal fellows who authored this report. Greg will talk about this in much more interesting ways than I can, but I wanted to give you the bottom lines that we found, and more reports on this topic are coming. But we wanted to spotlight the outdoor rec impact on the economy. It's big business, and in 2023 alone, this is known that the Colorado economy had about $36.5 billion in GDP is coming from the outdoor recreation industry, $11 billion in local, state, and federal tax revenue, and over 400,000 jobs. Yet the rights are really tricky here. Colorado's legal framework around river access should consider the needs of both private property owners and public access, is a big takeaway that you'll hear more from Greg. While the water flowing through Colorado's streams and rivers is public, the stream bed and embankments are often privately owned, meaning wading and anchoring could be considered trespassing. Access disputes in recent decades have been solved through case-by-case mediation rather than through a firm legal framework. And Colorado is really unique when it comes to this topic, and I found this particularly interesting as someone who's only been in the state for about 10 years. Colorado has spent billions to expand outdoor recreation and access for the general public. It has consistently invested in expanding access through a variety of ways, and it's mainly funded through the lottery funds. GOCO stands for Great Outdoors Colorado, if you were wondering. And since its inception in 1994, GOCO has spent an estimated $1.6 billion on various projects across the state, including expanding river and stream access. There are over 1,100 miles of rivers protected and 66,000 acres added to the state park system. So I wanted to ground you all with some of the key findings and data points, but I am now really excited to introduce Vince Bzdek to come to the stage, and I will introduce him, and then he will introduce the rest of our panelists, who I think many of you know and can really bring this issue to light. Vince is the executive editor of the Denver Gazette and the Colorado Springs Gazette. He formerly worked for the Washington Post and the Denver Post and has written 2 political books. He also writes a weekly column for the Gazette, and we are really thrilled. He is by far our best moderator we've ever had. So thanks, Vince, for taking this to the next step.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for being here. I'm especially glad to be here because I'm from Brush, Colorado, and we have the best mascot in the state, the Brush Beet Diggers. I just want everybody to know that right away. But also, we just finished a series in the Denver Gazette and Colorado Springs Gazette called Rural Reckoning, and it was about the gap between what rural areas contribute to the state through agriculture, energy production, tourism, outdoor recreation, and the intention, money, and support they receive in the halls of the Capitol and the governor's mansion. So I point you to that series if you're interested in the topics we're talking about today. But let me get started by introducing our panelists, and let me bring them up there one by one, bring them up here one by one. First, I want to start with Greg Walcher. Greg is one of the country's most recognized and respected leaders in natural resources policy, something I heard directly from 3 people here today already. He's the author of Smoking Them Out, The Theft of the Environment, and How to Take It Back. Writes a weekly newspaper column on natural resources issues and a blog with several thousand subscribers nationwide. He is president of the Natural Resources Group, serves on the board of the Energy and Environment Legal Institute, the Policy Advisory Board of the Heartland Institute, and it is a Heritage Foundation issue expert. Greg, nice to have you here. Joining us also is Senator Byron Pelton, the senator for Colorado District 1, representing Logan, Morgan, Phillips, Sedgwick, Washington, Yuma, and parts of Weld counties. Senator Pelton is a Colorado native born in Cheyenne County and has spent the last 20 years living in Logan County, and he also served in the U.S. Navy. And I understand that he's not wearing his hat today because of a certain tractor accident. Maybe we'll hear more about that. Brian, thanks for joining us. Byron, thanks for joining us. We also have Erin Karney Spaur, who has been on the staff with the Colorado Cattlemen's Association since 2015 and was appointed Executive Vice President in 2022. She leads the nation's oldest Cattlemen's Association in this role, working closely with state and national policymakers, regulatory agencies, media, and consumers to advocate for the CCA members and the broader Colorado beef industry. Erin, welcome. All right, we're going to do questions, have a panel discussion for about half an hour, then we'll take some questions directly from the audience. I wanted to start off with a kind of an opening question for everyone. Maybe we just go from right to left here. All of you on the panel have expertise in agriculture and outdoor recreation. So let's open with this. From your perspective, why are the topics of agriculture and natural resources so important to Colorado? Greg, you want to start us?
Well, good morning. Let me, you saw the numbers about how vital this industry is to our state, how many jobs it creates, how many billions of dollars it creates in both in government revenue and particularly in economic impact. And so we've sort of touched on several different issues that may at the surface seem kind of almost unrelated, but of course it's all wrapped up together in how much Colorado is dependent on its natural resources. This is a state highly unusual, in fact unique in America in that particular sense. Its economy is absolutely 100% tied to the resources in this state. And so the particular study that Mike and I have worked on, and I'll just really quickly hit a couple of high spots on it. I don't want to talk for very long because I know that most people would want to talk about wolves this morning. And also I remember my grandmother used to say there should be a beatitude for public meetings. Blessed are the brief, for they shall be invited again. And I want to be invited again because this is actually the first of 3 studies we're doing on this subject because it's a fairly broad topic, but it's all kind of wrapped up in this question of whether or not you have the right to float across private property. And right is kind of a loaded word in that context because as Americans we tend to think of inalienable rights that are the gift of our Creator and that government can't do anything about. We have those, but you also have some rights that actually end at the beginning of my driveway. And this is a complicated question in Colorado because legally our state treats the right to float across private property differently than many other states. And that's partly because in this state the stream bed and the stream banks belong to whoever the adjacent landowner is. Now in a lot of Colorado that's federal agencies, but in much of the state it isn't. So public access for floating on the water is fairly well established in Western law, including in Colorado, where the waters of the state belong to the public, including the right to use those waters recreationally. So as you saw the numbers, rafting and kayaking and canoeing and so on are multi-billion-dollar industries in this state, and that creates a fairly uneasy balance. But here, as Mike King, as some of you know Mike King, he was, we both were directors of the Department of Natural Resources at one time, I under Governor Owens and he under, as my successor under Governors Ritter and Hickenlooper. Both dealt with this issue significantly over the years because floaters continue to push the envelope and continue to want not only the right to float, but also the right to wade and to anchor and to portage around obstructions and even the right to cross private land to get to the stream. which is a difficult issue in this state. A lot of other states have different water laws. A lot of states have riparian water laws where the water just goes with the land and you don't have to have a water right to use it. But in the West, that isn't generally the case. So here we've had years and years and years of litigation and legislation and ballot initiatives. Every time we turn around, someone's proposing something like that different again, almost always unsuccessful. Partly because in Colorado, we have a very, very strong constitutional protection against takings of private property, stronger even in some ways than the federal protection under the Fifth Amendment. So if the state were to suddenly declare all the stream banks to be public land, the compensation would be in the billions, and it's a very difficult economic issue. That's part of the issue. Another part of it is, and this is where we really get to the heart of in this first study, and that is that there is a significant lack of good information that recreationists can access that tells them exactly where you can go and where you can't go. We have a kind of a case-by-case situation in Colorado because that's what has worked. But in this, people don't know that in the Colorado River, there's 150 miles of it is on public land and plenty of places where you can access it. 100 miles of the Yampa River and 175 miles of the White River, 120 miles of the Gunnison River. There are lots of places where public access is okay. Because it crosses public land. But even in some private lands, our system in this state has evolved to this case-by-case mediated process. We started this in the year 2000 when we had this huge conflict going on in the Taylor River Basin because, actually for one simple reason, they're not all the same in this state. There are places where recreationists can float through private property and it's no particular threat to the private property owner. We have some places where the owner has said that's totally fine as long as they don't leave their trash. You have also places in this state where the private owner has invested massive amounts of money in creating a gold medal fishery that wasn't there before, in creating stream habitat, operating guest ranches so that they sell access to that business which they created. So obviously having somebody that's not paying float through there and take the fish is a threat to that business model. You have places where fencing is necessary because of livestock. There's various different situations. And so the legislature, that worked fairly well for a decade or so. The legislature finally formalized that case-by-case negotiated process, and it works fairly well. So let me just end by saying this. Recreational access to the waters is absolutely critical to Colorado's economy. None of us, I think, in this room would view that as a particular threat, but the balance between that and private property makes Colorado unique and different. We're unique, different than all the other Western states. There's several of them, of the other Western states, as we chronicle in the report, where the water and the stream below it belongs to the public, and you can go anywhere you want. And people are always saying, why can't we just do that in Colorado? Our water situation is different in this state than any other state. We have evolved this complex water law because we're different than the other states. There isn't any water that flows into Colorado. We have 90 million people in 17 states that depend on water that originates in Colorado. So how we treat that and the property connected with it is different than other states. We have compensated for that, though, as was mentioned a second ago, by creating this public process for spending money on outdoor recreation and public access that all the other Western states couldn't dream of doing. We are the only state that has the Great Outdoors Colorado program. We are the only state that dedicates its lottery revenue to parks and wildlife and open space and outdoor recreation, including purchasing stream access in a lot of places. Colorado's invested over $2 billion in that over the years, and including well over $1 billion just from the GOCO program alone. So we are different than other states. In our water situation, in our private property situation, Colorado is more than a third federal land. Federal government owns virtually all of the resources west of the Continental Divide, all the 14ers, all the ski slopes, all of the oil and gas locations, all of the best recreation lands. And so it is a different state, and we ought to not only be willing to acknowledge that we're unique, but be proud of that. So this first study, we did an analysis of the sort of the legal framework. How exactly does it work in Colorado, and why? Why is it set up the way it is? And then a couple of future studies, we're going to get into how the land is managed and what kind of stewardship the private landowners exercise over the waters of the state, how they take care of it, Do they take care of it, and so on. And in the final study, we'll get into the economics of it and what the dollar numbers will look like.
Great, great. Thank you. Erin, same question. From your perspective, why are the topics of agriculture and natural resources so important to Colorado?
Yeah, when we look at the agriculture industry and the recreation industry, they're the number 1 and 2 industries in Colorado. Agriculture is a $47 billion industry to Colorado, with cattle and calves being the largest sector. And so that's why it's so important. But more than that, I think when you think of the iconic Colorado views, the view sheds, the open spaces, the wildlife, a lot of those are attributed to ranches, family ranches, and most of our members. And so I think more than the economics, it's also the contributions to those family ranches, to wildlife, open space, and then also to rural communities.
Great, thank you. Senator Pelton, same question.
Totally agree with everything that Erin said. Was the partnership between agriculture and the natural resources in Colorado is a big plus for all of us. I mean, like Erin said, just in my district in the northeast corner, out of the $47 billion of agriculture that's produced in the state, over $4.6 billion is just in my counties that I represent. I represent 7 counties, but 6 of them are in the top 10 ag producing counties in the state. And that is because of the South Platte River and the Republican Rivers, respectively. So, I mean, we touch both sides, and we couldn't have one without the other. And and every county in the state of Colorado has some agriculture in it. If you ever look at the Colorado Department of Agriculture website, they'll show you a big map of how much agriculture is produced in the state. And almost every county, there's only one county that doesn't have much agriculture, and that was Denver County. I will say that that's the home of the National Western Stock Show that we all love. So I disagree. I was like, that's the best thing about agriculture right there. So, but again, and I'd like to say one thing that Vince didn't say earlier when he introduced me is I am home to the best people from Brush and the entire northeast corner and the worst roads in the state of Colorado.
We just wrote about that too.
Yeah.
Thanks for your help with that. Okay, Greg, let's start with you. You just completed this report that we just talked about. So I kind of wonder, what do you think the future is for Colorado's public river access? And what would you ask of the legislature going forward to protect that river access or even enhance the laws that we already have?
I think we already have a fairly strong body of law on this. It isn't the same law that everybody seems to want, but it isn't the same as if we have no law on this. We have a fairly well-defined process in Colorado that I described a second ago. This case-by-case mediated process, which the Department of Natural Resources is involved in, where we can get together around a table, the recreationists or whoever it is that's pushing, and the property owners. And in this state, when you get reasonable people together around a table, they can generally come to some agreement that works for everybody. And that has worked really, really well. Not 100% of the time, but it's worked really well for more than 20 years now in Colorado. So I would encourage the legislature to leave it alone because, as the report concludes, almost anything that they do could make the situation worse. They could wind up, maybe unintentionally, creating a massive financial liability for the state if they do something that impacts people's private property rights that they might have to pay for. And if they go the extreme the other way, they could cause damage the other way. So, sometimes it's counterintuitive to get people to spend several weeks writing an academic study with lots of footnotes and everything to conclude that we don't need to do anything. So if anyone here thinks that we wasted their time with that, I'm sorry. But the fact that Senator, you know this better than anybody, the fact that you're a legislator doesn't mean you have to legislate all the time. And the fact that it's possible in this state for people to put an initiative on the ballot doesn't necessarily mean they ought to do that. Yeah. It's complicated here because the same water that's used by the floaters is also the same water that belongs to
Yeah.
somebody and that is heavily used in agriculture and municipal uses for energy, electric production, and so on. So it's all complicated enough that I would just encourage the legislature to be awfully careful about moving on this.
Let me just follow up with a related issue. You know, the Colorado River Compact is being debated right
Yes.
now or rethought. And I wonder if you could give us just a couple minutes on where you think that's going and whether or not Colorado should have more rights to that water.
Well, the ultimate protection for Colorado is the Interstate Compact. And it seems like every few years, someone in the lower basin wants to rewrite the Interstate Compact. Colorado is never going to agree to that, not under any governor of either political party in my lifetime or my great-grandkids' lifetime, because it is the only protection. If water is available to whoever has the most money, there won't be any for Colorado. So we cannot abide any kind of a change in the Interstate Compact. What we can do is administer it according to the spirit of it,
Yeah.
which was that the upper basin's entitled to half the water in the river. The idea that somehow, and I know I'm kind of starting that story in the middle, but the idea that somehow Colorado ever agreed to give California a fixed amount of water, no matter what the flow in the river was, just defies common sense. That isn't what the intent of the compact was. So if the flow of the river is 1 million acre feet less than it used to be, fine, everybody gets the same percentage that they're getting now. If we did it that way, Colorado would be getting about what it's getting already because it's the only state that doesn't use its entire entitlement. California would be getting 3.8 million acre feet, not 4.4. And I'll just close by saying, in all these negotiations going on where the federal government is trying to demand the upper basin give more water to the lower basin, et cetera, this is an authority the federal government does not have.
Mm-hmm.
It has no authority at all to tell Colorado what it can and can't do with its water. That is regulated by an interstate compact, which is second only maybe to a treaty. It supersedes federal statutes even. It was agreed by 7 states, ratified by Congress, signed by the president. The Bureau of Reclamation has no authority to tell us anything different. So with that backdrop, I would say on the side of the upper basin, and I said this in lots of meetings where I was negotiating on behalf of Colorado, I have absolutely zero sympathy for California sitting on 800 miles of coastline on the largest body of water on Earth. And the idea that they somehow need more water from Colorado is insane. They are the ones who decided. They are the ones who decided that desalinization wasn't something they wanted to spend money on. No one asked us to vote on that. There are countries all over the world that get their water supply out of the ocean, and California can as well. So that my answer is Colorado ought to sit at the negotiating table with a very deep line in the sand beyond which we will not cross.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that. Senator Pelton, you said something that caught my attention. I'm interested in the relationship between agriculture and outdoor recreation and agriculture and private property rights. I wonder if you could sort of speak to how Colorado should balance the economic value of agriculture with outdoor recreation and private property rights.
Well, recently it's a strained relationship, and we're going to get into that with wolves.
Yeah.
I have a perfect example is that our ranchers in northeastern Colorado work really well with CPW. However, with standing up with our ag producers across the state, I want to tell the audience here that I was very fortunate to live in Cheyenne Wells, but I also lived over on the Roaring Fork Valley, up and down the Roaring Fork Valley, and I actually lived just right over the hill from where the depredations are going on right now with the wolves. I lived on Snowmass Creek Road, and then they're up in Capitol Creek, just right around the corner from where I lived. So I'm very familiar with the fact of what's going on up there. The governor told me that when I met with him one time that I don't ever have to worry about it because I'll never have wolves in my district. But the problem is that those cattle that are on the western slope end up in our feedlots, and we feed them out. And we produce the best product to be on the tables across the world for families. And I just have to tell you that the Yuma County cattlemen have stepped up and said, we are no longer going to work with CPW, and we're going to close our gates. So the relationship now is trying to get strained with I have a lot of good places that I get to hunt out there because I have permission from large landowners that say, yes, please shoot antelope over here on my property, or take harvest a deer over here. I have a great relationship with them. Now that relationship is starting to go away because you've got to get those permissions because of the private property rights. And the recreation part of it is very well respected as well. They allow us to walk on their property, walk our dogs. My favorite thing was ride motorcycles, like dirt bikes, back when I was a kid, and ride on property that I had permission to do so up in the Roaring Fork Valley. These are all great things that we have, but when people start saying we're going to close our gates, that's to everybody. And then that has a really tough time with the recreational aspect of it, and also with working with CPW to continue the way they manage the wildlife across the state.
Makes sense, makes sense. Erin, let's move to the topic of wolves.
Yeah.
I had encouraged you to look at the report just released by CSI. Erin, you represent the Colorado Cattlemen's Association and support expanding and protecting Colorado beef production. How do you and your members view these issues around wolves, and how does it impact livestock? Can you kind of give us that perspective?
Yeah, I don't know that we have enough time to cover everything this morning. But just to give you a little snippet, this is probably the top issue that's affecting our members, especially on the Western Slope right now. And Colorado Cattlemen's Association has been leading on this issue. I also have to give a shout out. Jim Sanderson is sitting in the room and has been a great mentor and an advocate in finding a path forward for our Colorado Cattlemen's Association, as well as our a wolf coalition that we've put together between counties, other associations, and our affiliate groups. So I wanted to mention that. But I think when we look at this, at the end of the day, our producers recognize that this was voter mandated. And we recognize wolves are going to be on the ground. However, we as stewards of the land and livestock, we want what's best for the livestock, the wolves, and the wildlife. And what we're doing right now, we feel like is not to the best interest of the wolves, livestock, or wildlife. And so that's why we've continuously asked CPW Commission, the state legislature, and every single avenue that we could possibly think of to take a pause, because those producers on the ground, whether it be in Middle Park last year, in the Roaring Fork Valley, in Rio Blanco County, just all across the Western Slope, it's not only the economic losses that I'm fearful of, it's the social and mental losses as well. And when we talk about stream access, we talk about recreation, now we talk about wolves, it's just chipping away at the family ranchers and the mental health and well-being of our ranchers. And I'm just really concerned about this issue being the epicenter for Colorado to lose family ranches, to lose private landowners, because it's just like one thing after another, and they just feel like everything's pitted against them. And so that's why Colorado Cattlemen's as an association has continued to advocate on behalf of those producers and family ranches, because what's happening on the ground is not right. And when we talk to others that have been in part of other species introduction, they took a pause. When things were not going right, specifically in the lynx introduction, they took a pause. When the animals, there was a high mortality rate, and there was conflicts, they took a pause and said, let's take a breather, let's put programs in place, let's do what's best for the animals. And right now, it just seems like it's pushing forward in the best interest of maybe the government, rather than what's for the best interest of those on the land.
So tell me more about what that pause would look like. Do you mean stop reintroducing more wolves, or do something with the wolves that are already here, or what's a pause look like?
A pause right now, they're slated to introduce more wolves, specifically in the southern region, and it looks like it's going to be in Gunnison County
Yeah.
in the next, I would say, 6 months. And so that would be pausing that introduction. But also, I would say with that, we have to stop protecting bad wolves. And bad wolves mean those that eat livestock.
Yeah.
And so we continue to protect them, and we have to take care of or manage those. And when I say manage, I mean lethally manage them, and make sure that they don't teach that behavior to other wolves. And so I would say it's manage the bad wolves, and then also take a pause from additional wolf introductions to ensure programs in place. What we're doing currently is not sustainable. In the Roaring Fork Valley, they have range riders 24/7. They have, I can't even explain what's going on the ground, and that's not sustainable if you're gonna put another 10 or 15 wolves on the ground and continue to put all of those resources
Do
on.
those range riders work? Does that work?
Good question. I would say if they're present, yes, but currently, I believe there's 15 range riders for the entire state. And so when you think about the landscape on the western slope, especially where cattle are right now on the western slope, turned out on public lands, and just, some allotments are, 20, 30,000 acres.
Yeah.
In order to monitor that, and then if there's constant pressure from wolves, it literally is 24/7 presence. And so 15 people are not enough.
Got it.
It is proven to be one of the most
But
effective.
it's expensive too, right?
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
proven to be most effective, but you just need more
Got it.
people on the ground.
Management is an interesting concept when you're dealing with wildlife.
Yeah.
The wolves are completely unaware of all this activity on their behalf. And the voters in Denver and Boulder thought they could vote to reintroduce wolves in Grand and Moffett counties.
Right.
The wolves don't know about this management plan. They don't know about CPW's broken promises. They don't know about any of this. They go where they go. So that's not a comment about the wisdom of reintroducing species, by the way, which I've generally been an advocate for. I presided over the reintroduction of the lynx, including the pause that you described.
Right.
And also the reintroduction of a wide range of species in Colorado. A bunch of river fish species and black-footed ferrets and greater prairie chickens and boreal toads and all kinds of things. Wolves are different because they don't peacefully coexist with people and their cattle. And this is not the Yukon Territory. There's 6 million people in this state. So, the managers can do what they want to do, but those wolves, as you see on the map, they're going to wind up in Boulder and Denver anyway, sooner or later.
Yeah, and another thing that has been kind of missed in this discussion so far is if it was just the introduction, we actually followed the plan and we're supposed to be doing, but the fact that this governor and the first gentleman have politicized this introduction with the appointments that's being appointed on the CPW commission, with there's just been a lot of things that have been going on from the governor's office that inserts himself into this. It makes Jeff Davis's job very hard at CPW, because if he's got to, and don't get me wrong, Jeff Davis has made some big mistakes with transparency and that sort of thing, and Erin and I have been very vocal with him. Several of us in the legislature have been very vocal with him about being more transparent. But it's almost like that this governor is setting up CPW to fail in that situation with the over politicization of the wolf introduction.
Senator Pelton, you can kind of give us the legislative perspective. The legislature tried to do something about wolves in the special session just convened, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that and tell us what you think the the next steps are in terms of policy changes?
So the bill that started off as Senator Cattlemen and Senator Roberts' bill, where they were actually taking the money away. You guys saw the expenditures of the wolf introduction. So what they were trying to do is take the money away and actually essentially give it a pause for a little bit of time here, so we can actually get everybody more range riders, more protections for the people who raise livestock. The governor's office didn't like that, so they came up and worked out a deal with the sponsors where if he could raise the money. Now, this sets a horrible precedent. And I have to tell you, I had the media in my office afterwards about this, because when they were asking me about another bill with a high fiscal note, I said, well, just have the governor reach into his pockets and talk to the rich benefactors that he has, and they can run the money to pay for whatever fiscal note he wants, because that's what this is doing. So what they did is they worked out a deal where they're still going to do the introduction of wolves in 6 months in Gunnison County, but it's going to be money raised, and it's not going to come out of the general fund. So that's a little frustrating all the way around, because essentially, if you're going to have a bill and you're going to run a bill, it has to go through 2 chambers and be signed by the governor. So the governor would have vetoed the bill from Senators Cattlemen and Roberts out of the Senate, and I think they worked out a deal where he could make it to where he could sign it. And that was by raising the money to do that. And that's just frustrating. I think what we need to do as a body is make sure that we continue to pay for the compensation of the animals that are being depredated. That needs to happen, number one. Number two, we've got to stop with the politicizing of the introduction. And it starts in the administration's office. And we have a couple CPW appointees that we're going to be having in front of us that a few of us have some trouble with. One of them is one of the ones that came up with the mountain lion thing. So it just continue a blatant assault on agriculture in the state, and that's what everybody feels like. Like I said, I have the best people in the world that I represent in the Northeast corner, and they feel like they've been attacked and attacked and attacked with their way of life and what they do for the state of Colorado and the world when it comes to producing agriculture. And they're just fed up, and they're really hoping that with a new governor that we won't have these problems anymore, and that hopefully moving forward that we won't have politicization of wolves any longer. So,
Erin, let's finish with you before we go to the audience. What would you like to see in terms of policy changes going forward in general about wolves, or in general? I mean, clearly you would like to see wolves introduced in Greenwood Village, right?
I think Byron hit on it, of the politicizing of a species, and instead of doing what's right for the species, the landowners, the landscape, we're politicizing the species and putting that above all else. I also have to say, we have seen, Kelly mentioned the ballot measures that we faced last session, or last year. We're also seeing additional ballot measures be proposed for this, the upcoming years. And I think it just feels like constant attacks on private property rights, our landowners, and just agriculture in general. And so I think we, as CCA, as well as a number of other organizations, will continue to advocate, because at the end of the day, no one can argue with producing food, right? And we're producing food and fiber for the local communities, the state, the nation. And I don't know why that continues to be attacked, or why people want to put us out of business, but that's what it feels like. And I think it's time for agriculture, as well as all the adjacent industries, to stand up and stop the attacks and stop the politicizing of species and other issues.
Thank you. All right, let's go to the audience. Let's take some questions from the audience. Yeah, Chris.
Hi, my name is Chris Park. I'm originally from Gunnison County, lived there almost 2 decades. Really concerned about wolf reintroduction in Gunnison County because it's prime cattle country. But beyond the wolves, this is part of an agenda. And the latest part of the agenda is now fur bearers. They're redoing the fur bearer management plan. And they're specifically carving out beavers. And anybody that's ever been on private land and had a beaver, you can see how much damage they do by rerouting waterways, et cetera. So I'm just kind of curious, is that on your radar? Is there anything that you plan to do?
I can.
Go ahead.
Erin?
I'm lucky enough to be on the fur bearers working group as well as the beaver management group. So, and so it is on our radar. But I think when we continue to look at the fur bearers process, the beaver management strategy, they're not looking like what we say at the legislature or in policy is just leave us alone. We don't need any changes. And they have to have a recommendation, a change coming out of those. And so that's what scares us is it's also jaded from the administration standpoint. And so we are watching that and engaged in it. But that's what I talk about, the constant attacks is it's just one thing after another after another. But we are on it, and a number of other ag and also wildlife organizations are on that as well.
It also
My understanding is there's a ton of money behind the beaver.
it also is very telling, and you guys seen it this last election, where the animal activism is just reaching all high pinnacles because the governor has given it a platform. And that's what's really getting to us, is like, there are people who think that we go out and beat up our cattle or molest them when we AI them. You know, these are all things that we've been accused of, which that is not the case at all. And my kids actually came home and said, Dad, we can't believe that what's being said on some of these websites and stuff. And I just told them, I said flat out, I said, they don't know. They don't know that that animal has the best 36 months of its life because we make sure that it has that best 36 months before we use it for food. And we treat them so well. And just to have those people accuse us of these things because of the animal activism, it's just getting out of control.
I'll just add one more thing. I think we can sit here in Denver, Greenwood Village, and just think we have this biodiversity crisis. We're in a crisis when all you see is I-25, I-76, 70. But when you're in Gunnison County or you're on my family's ranch in southeast Colorado, you can sit there and say, look at all these species of grasses, of wildlife. And we're not in a biodiversity crisis like they want to make out. But when you sit here in the metropolitan area, you can believe the lies and kind of propaganda that they put out.
All right, we're going to bring you a microphone. Next question. How about right here? Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to bring you a microphone, sir.
Okay. Thank you. My name's Pat Shaw. Is it working? Is it on? Okay, my name's Pat Shaw, and I'm a Denver resident. I also have a ranch in Grand County. My ranch, it was within a mile of the Copper Creek Pack. I think Jim is here and well aware of the issues that we faced up there. My first question is the money that is private money that's going to be used. Who is that? And I know I read a few days ago that hasn't been disclosed, but who is providing the funding for the program to enlarge?
That's a great question because I don't think any of us know. And that was my problem when we had that discussion was I don't think we're going to know who's going to raise the money to do that. The transparency goes away when you use private money, and that's going to be a big issue.
My second comment is this issue's created a lot of animosity between landowners and CPW.
Yeah.
And as a rancher, most of us work really closely with CPW. We support their studies. We support the deer study, sage grouse. And the CPW guys on the ground are really uncomfortable. They're not going to say anything because it's their job, and we understand that. And this is a generalization, but I have absolute evidence of that. And to manage our wildlife species, there has to be cooperation between private. The way our state is laid out, there has to be cooperation between the CPW and private landowners. And that change, which has happened over the last 2 years, I think is really a bad thing for Colorado and our wildlife.
Thanks. Next question, right here.
Good morning. Thank you guys for being here. Nina Anderson. I'm a fifth generation out of Routt and Moffat counties and currently in Mesa County. Some of us have been in Colorado long enough to recall when parks were separate from wildlife. Is there an appetite, and that seems to now be creating such a huge conflict of interest. Is there an appetite for, and what would it take to divide those again to resolve some of the conflict?
I know we've discussed that a couple of times. I mean, my constituents ask me the same question. They want to do the same thing. Unfortunately, I think it was my predecessor who ran that bill that might have to shrink government. But I think that there are some issues with them being combined. Just like you said, there is some conflicts of interest, and it's going to be what's going on with CPW right now. And don't get me wrong, Jeff Davis has done a better job. He's not there yet, but they are destroying so many relationships when it comes to landowners that we're gonna reach a breaking point where they're not going to be able to do their jobs. Because I just pointed out a great example of the Yuma County Cattlemen. They've already said, we're closing our gates. CPW, you're not welcome. There's going to be more that are doing that because of the way that this introduction is going on and the way the animal activists are starting to try to take over our state. So yes, do I agree there are some conflicts of interest? Absolutely. And maybe we need to look at doing a transparency bill in that aspect of it.
And I'll just add, I think building upon CPW, talking to some CPW employees, they're really fearful they're going to lose about 40% of their staff, whether it's retirement or just them leaving. And those that are backfilling them don't have the same values or understanding or past knowledge. And I think that will continue to just break down the barriers. And I'll reiterate what Pat said. It's not the local guys on the ground.
No.
It's higher up into the administration. And we just want to continue to support those CPW on the ground, but continue to put pressure on those higher up in the administration.
All right. Next question, way in back there.
Yeah, Kenny Rogers here. Question on water. We see, and I heard you mention the Colorado River issue with California up in Byron's backyard, the Perkins Canal, and out in my backyard. I am from Yuma, by the way. The South Republican River compact there, and they had to dry up from a focus area 25,000 acres of irrigated land. I mean, obviously that has a huge impact on agriculture, but my question is, I don't see, and many of us don't see, what we consider significant pushback against many of these old river compacts. The one on the South Fork of the Republican, for example, was written in 1936. And obviously conditions were much different then than they are today. So are we going to see some type of an effort to re-examine those old compacts?
Good.
Well, at the risk of appearing to be on a different side, I will say, not if I have anything to say about it. Those compacts may be old, as you describe, but they were written at a time when Colorado was under maybe even a more dire threat than it is today by bigger cities in lower downstream states who had way more political clout than a brand new state of Colorado had. So in the early part of the last century, when most of those compacts were negotiated, and we do have compacts on all 8 of the major river basins in Colorado, when those were negotiated, we didn't even have a big giant metropolitan area here like we have today. Colorado had 2 congressmen at the time. And so when they negotiated those compacts, they did yeoman work, in my opinion, in making sure that all of the other states knew that Colorado was going to use at least some of the water that originates in this state. If we open those compacts up to renegotiation, I'm just telling you, there's a very big threat that Colorado will lose some of what we already are legally entitled to. So the compacts that we have that relate to the Republican River and the South Platte and the Arkansas and especially the Colorado, in my mind, are sacrosanct, and opening up for renegotiating, I think, would be a big mistake on our state's part.
Next question.
And I just want to make sure that everybody knows this. We get 500,000 acre feet coming over from Colorado. Isn't that correct, Greg? Isn't that the number? 500,000 acre feet
Of what?
of Colorado water into the South Platte when it comes over the diversion tunnel. So it's very important that Nebraska doesn't entitle to any of that water. So, and they need to know that. And so that was not in the compact when they were writing it to have that in there. So
And the Nebraska issue is an interesting example of, though, where you have a governor of a downstream state threatening to come and literally condemn property in Colorado so they can take water out of your district for Nebraska, where it's completely the wrong solution to a fairly simple problem.
right,
Colorado,
and you can ask Kenny Rogers what that does when anybody comes to your property and starts talking condemnation, and the first thing that happens is, please leave my property. So
yeah, and it's the entirely wrong answer. This state is entitled to more water than it uses in all 8 of those river basins. We don't have enough storage capacity to store all of the water Colorado's entitled to in the South Platte or the Colorado or any of the other basins. And some of the water that we're allowed to use goes downstream just because we didn't have the ability to do something else with it. The right solution, as Senator Sonnenberg used to say, was for Nebraska and Colorado to pool its resources and build some storage that'll benefit both states. Then no one has to be condemning water anyplace. So there is a right way and a wrong way to approach it. And rewriting compacts and taking legal action against each other, in my mind, is just the wrong way to go.
And I think that's why Nebraska is doing this, suing Colorado right now, is to try to rewrite the compact.
Yeah.
Okay, we got time for one more question. Stan, you want to take it?
Good morning, Stan Vanderwerf, and good morning, Senator. How you doing?
Good morning.
I happen to be a member of the executive team that ran the citizen ballot measure to try and stop wolf introduction in the state of Colorado. And I wanted to kind of talk about a little story that happened to me in recruiting petitioners to get signatures. It wasn't too hard to get Republicans to recruit Republicans, but we recruited also successfully a lot of Democrats. And one in particular that lives up in the Denver area here said something to me that I'm going to ask you to comment on that I thought was really interesting. He called this wolf trafficking. And his argument was that, why would you take an animal that's living its life with its pack away from humans in Canada, chase it, capture it, drug it, transport it, and release it in a place where it's guaranteed to have conflict, and now 12 wolves have been killed as a result of that? How about we just leave them alone in Canada? Where they can live their lives uninterrupted by humans. So that was very interesting to me. He used this word, wolf trafficking, and I'd like to ask you to comment to that term.
Erin?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting term, and I think when we talk about what we want, what's best for the livestock, wolves, and wildlife, that's what we're concerned about. You might have saw one of the maps, a female did a 1,200-mile circle. And when you think of that, she went from Rocky Mountain National Park all the way to Mesa County, Delta County, and almost down to the border. And you feel bad for the wolf because she's just in this unknown country thinking, where the heck am I? It's really hot here, and this doesn't look like anything I'm familiar with. I think this is the danger with ballot box biology. And this is the danger with voter mandated propositions that say, you must do this, while ignoring the fact that biologists and others are saying this does not work. We had no problem with wolves naturally migrating from Wyoming, and if they found a home, they found a home. If not, they usually went back. And so this is the issue, and I think as we continue to see more and more ballot measures or petitions come in front of CPW Commission, I always find it ironic that they think they know better or they know best than the wildlife that have been here. And so I think that's the absolute danger, and that's what we're just trying to send a warning signal of this is not right, and it's not right for the
One of
animals.
the lynx hated it so bad here that he hightailed it back to British Columbia.
Yeah, and when they were
This
starving
is-
to death, when I was living up there, when they were starving to death, we were calling it Operation Skinny Kitty.
This is exactly the reason why the lynx program was paused. Because they did the same thing to them that they did to the wolves that you just described, after spending 3 years and several $1 million identifying what would be the perfect habitat for them in a state where they never were native to begin with, in the South San Juans. They went and trapped them and drugged them, and they're scared to death. They put them on airplanes, fly them to the South San Juans, and release them in front of TV cameras and flash bulbs. The first thing they did was run as fast as they could, as far as they could, away from the best habitat that had been identified for them. So a bunch of them starved to death. Some of them got killed by cars. Well, this whole thing is a comment about ballot initiatives, right? Setting water policy by ballot initiative would be just as big a mistake as it is to set wildlife policy by ballot initiative.
You're saying it should be up to the legislature, not ballot initiative?
Well, some of this is in the Constitution, particularly on the water,
Yeah.
on the water side. But having people mess around with it by ballot initiative, you wind up with policy set by low information voters in Denver and Boulder that don't understand what they're doing.
Got it. Let's have a hand for our panelists, guys. And Kelly's going to come back up and say a few words to close us up.
Feel free to take your seats. You guys can be a little more comfortable. Thank you again. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you, Vince. Thank you. If you enjoyed today's program, I hope that you'll consider joining us at our 5th annual Free Enterprise Summit. It is this December. It is December 9th. It will be in Glendale at the Infinity Park Event Center, and our keynote speaker will be Hannah Skandera, the CEO of the Daniels Fund. We will also be celebrating 4 winners who we think really represent free enterprise principles. This year, Carrie Tynan will receive the Free Enterprise Trailblazer Award. JJ Ament and the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce will be receiving our organizational award for Champion of Prosperity. And then each year we give out 2 awards for policymakers who we think represent free enterprise in action. The Commissioner of Adams County, Steve O'Dorisio, will be one of those winners. And the second winner, I think, is here today. And we're just surprising her here because she registered. Mayor Pico will be our visionary of the future on the Republican side. We gotcha. So we were excited to surprise you. Hopefully we didn't embarrass you. But Mayor Pico will be our 4th winner that we will be celebrating. We have a QR code where you can buy a table to support our summit. Those sponsorships are moving quickly. If we could just go back to that slide with that, that would be great. I now would just like to welcome Earl Wright to the podium to close us out. Many of you know that Earl is one of CSI's founders. He is the chairman of CSI's Central Board, and he co-founded AMG over 50 years ago and is the chairman of this board. Thank you, Earl.
Thanks, Kelly. Thank you. Well, as you would probably guess, I'm up here to do the ask. But you know what? I'm not going to do the ask. I'm going to let AI do the ask. I pulled up AI this morning. And what did they say about Common Sense Institute? Well, they said that we are one of the public policy entities in the state of Colorado that has a meaningful role in producing for the state impact studies through research, policy analysis, and advocacy rather than direct services. So who do they compare us to? 6 other entities in the state. And what do they say about us? They said that we produced hard data analysis. What did they say about the other institutions? General information. Hard data analysis. Who else in the state has 3 PhDs in economics? That is a foundation for doing the work. Nobody. Who else in the state has an economic model that's unique to the state of Colorado, can assess the economic impact on free enterprise, income, the state, and you? Nobody. Common Sense Institute does. This foundation is objective research so that you, the difference makers in this state, have information where you can go out, use that information, and good public policy in place or challenge public policy that should be challenged so that we can go out and make certain people are well informed as to what's going on. So if they're going to make a decision one way or another, well, at least you're informed. You're just not feeling good about one thing or another. The advantage of Common Sense Institute for us in the state is that you have made us successful by your contributions, your support, your using the data that we provide. I thank you for that. And I ask you to think further about what you can do. I don't care if it's a nickel, dime, dollar, quarter, it all adds up. What can you do to help us continue the research and the mission we have? Your contributions are vital, as well as what you do in the community. So it's not one or the other. This doesn't buy your way out. This only makes your investment so that we can continue to provide you with the information that is going to allow us to make this state even more prosperous. Let me give you one last example. Did you know that we have and created an index on the well-being of this state relative to the states around us? Part of that is what we've shown you at the Eggs in the Economy in the past, or the Free Enterprise Summit in the past. We created that index. We said, let's look at 8 or 9 different areas of this state and compare it to states around us and how well are we doing? CSI did that, but we did it because we had your support. So when you leave today, I'm asking you to pick up an envelope. The young ladies over there are going to have them and force them into your hand. And hopefully, if you have a chance, that you'll send a contribution to us to help us continue what you've helped us create so far to make this state a better state for all of us. Thank you for coming today.